Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So I'm filming this on Sunday afternoon, and by now we've seen several price jumps as a result of sales on Black Friday, but they will not have taken into account any Cyber Monday sales as well, so do expect some things to continue to change this week. But as we go into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Off season, it's definitely a buyer's market. There's not as much of a demand for cards right now without any competitive events, so typically you can get cards for a little bit cheaper than usual because places still need to make sales. Today we are covering off a few cards that we've noticed moving in price this past weekend, as well as noting a couple of cards that you guys should pay attention to over the next month going into the next competitive format. Let's get started. Hey, so before we get started, just a reminder to go and check out our Black Friday sale over at MSTmerch.com. We have discounts on some of your favorite products over there, including mats, dividers, and single packs of our black, white, and pink sleeves. The sleeves have just been flying off the shelves. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from you guys on all of them, especially the pinks that have been really popular. We do also have oversleeves, the Ulti Instincts, the Ulti Egos, and of course NFT sleeves back in stock as well. Take advantage of the discounts until tonight because the sale will be going on just until Monday night. Make sure that you hop on over and check out MSTmerch.com. Alright, kicking things off, we have Aureus the Labyrinth Servant. So I remember when Aureus was first revealed, everyone just thought that this card was going to break the game for Labyrinth and how much of a boost it was for the strategy. Now at the time, Labyrinth was arguably the best deck in the game, but it seems to have fallen off recently in favor of decks like Unchained and Rescue Ace. It is still though a solid like tier 1.5, tier 2 deck. Anyways, it has a quick effect during the main phase where you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard to either special summon a Labyrinth monster from your hand or set a normal trap from your hand, but it also turns on that trap card, meaning it can be live during turn 0. It does have another effect where if your opponent responds to a normal trap or Labyrinth card except for itself, you can special summon Aureus back from your graveyard. So yes, Aureus is a very strong card for the Labyrinth strategy, but what we've really seen is a couple of players using Aureus to turn on certain trap cards for decks that are choosing to go first. I think the one that stands out to me that I remember is Exo Sisters using this card to turn on Exo Sister Vadis. I'm sure there are others, but that's the one that stands out to me right now. Anyways, we've seen the secret rare printing of Aureus start to trend upwards. This card was at around $10 to $12 for quite a while, but over the past few days, it has creeped up to the $15 to $16 mark. I'm sure that there are other decks that will find ways to use this card. Traps are often really powerful, right? But they're built that way because they're supposed to be inherently slower than monster or spell cards, so using Aureus to get around this can be really useful. And also, as a side note, Aureus is a level 6 monster and it's a dark, so you can use this and a level 4 monster to make Chaos Angel as well. Anyways, do keep an eye on Aureus as it is a pretty useful card. If Labyrinth starts to see more meta play, or if we see some other archetypes start to use Aureus to turn on their normal trap cards on turn 0, this card could see another bump up in price. Next up, we have Sword Soul Emergence. So Sword Soul was a really interesting deck. It was made up of the Tenyi engine, which really hadn't seen competitive play before, and then all of the Sword Soul cards, which were like one card synchros with really strong effects. Now, the deck never really got destroyed by the ban list. They did lose Protos, but aside from that, I think the deck just kind of got power crept out of the format. The other thing was that basically the entire deck got reprinted, with the Tenyis and Ghosts from the past 2, and then all of the Sword Soul cards in Magnificent Mavens, so no one really has been paying much attention to the cards because it's just sort of assumed that everyone has all of them. Well, looking at the market now, we've actually seen Sword Soul Emergence trend upwards in price over the last little while. The card has 2 ultra rare printings, the original from Burst of Destiny and then the Maven's reprint, and either of those is now actually going to cost you between $6 to $8, whereas they were only $2 to $3 before. Emergence itself is an incredible card searching for any Sword Soul monster, or if you already control a synchro, it lets you search for any worm monster in the game, which is really cool. Now, I don't think that Sword Soul as it currently exists is really going to do too much. They're too simple, and I still feel like it kind of dies if you imperm Moyi. However, I do think it's very likely that we'll see some Sword Soul support come out fairly soon. They are a really cool archetype that a lot of the player base loves. Also, I do remember someone telling me before that the Sword Soul archetype is actually based off of an old Chinese lore with a swordsmith couple. Moyi was the name of the sword that was given to the king, but there's another sword called Ganjiang, and we still haven't had any card like that created yet, so hopefully that's still down Konami's pipeline somewhere. Now that may explain the recent upward trend in the price of Emergence, but based off of everything, you may want to look at owning the entire Sword Soul deck before any new support is revealed. Moving on, I want to look again at Typhon Sky Crisis. Now every time I look at this card, I feel like it's pretty undervalued. This is one of the easiest cards in the game to summon, and it's something that can just win games for you that you probably shouldn't have won at all. It's a big body that's easy to bring out, it freezes monsters with 3,000 or more attack points, and it provides a non-targeting bounce as well. I actually had to make this card randomly at locals to out my opponent's Red Eyes Dark Dragoon after baiting out the negate. I think it was like my only way to get rid of Dragoon in Unchained. Now this card's price has fluctuated a bit recently. I think that early on, this card was at $15, it jumped out to like $23 for a bit there, it fell back down to $18, which is where it's been at for the last little while. Now the card has rebounded back up to $22, but I feel like the card still is sort of undervalued given how good it is. Looking at ultras from core sets in the past, we've seen things like IP Masquerena, Borreload Savage Dragon, and Bestial Dissipator get really expensive, and they're still ultras from core sets, and I think Typhon is something that I could see going the same way. I think the thing that's holding it back is the fact that Age of Overlord is actually a pretty good set, with 3 very strong secret rares in Wanted, SP, and Imseti. And with those 3 cards taking up so much value, other cards in the set naturally have a bit lower of a price point. Still though, Typhon is a really cool card that I could definitely see hitting the $30 mark, especially as decks that aren't as reliant on their extra deck, such as Labyrinth, are probably going to look to run this card in multiple copies. If you don't already have the card, I think this is something that you guys should definitely try to pick up a copy or 2 of, and see if you can snag them for around the $20 mark. Alright, so on to something that's maybe not as meta relevant, let's look at Guardian Slime. So in this spot we could have had either Guardian Slime or Ancient Chant, both of those being ultra rares from Legendary Duelist, Rage of Ra. Now all in all, these cards aren't very good, they're just supposed to be additional ways to help you out with summoning the Winged Dragon of Ra, so it should go without saying that the cards aren't exactly meta relevant. However, the reason we're looking at them here is that Egyptian God Slime was reprinted in Rarity Collection, while the other cards weren't. The result is that Egyptian God Slime is now an extremely affordable card, while Guardian Slime and Ancient Chant are now both harder to get ultras that casual fans will need to complete this little engine for their God card decks. This is a pretty common thing to see happen. If one part of a certain deck or engine gets reprinted, players will naturally turn to other cards from that same deck or engine and try to force the price of those other cards up, since they know that players will want to complete the deck or engine now that one piece is so much cheaper. Overall though, I don't think that this should matter for too many of you players that are just concerned about the game itself, and for collectors, it's probably just a better idea to hold off on picking up these cards until they eventually also do get reprinted. It seems that we aren't getting another Legendary Duelist box, so maybe we'll have to wait until something like the next Battles of Legend set before we see Guardian Slime get a reprint, but for now Guardian Slime has jumped from being only a $3 or $4 card to now being almost $10 per copy. If this card was cheap enough before that you guys just threw them into your bulk, or maybe you're sitting on a couple of copies, now after this most recent price bump is a great time to look at offloading them. Okay, now this one is pretty random. I feel like this price jump just came out of nowhere. We have Lober, Shadow of the Generator bosses. Lober is one of the few normal summons that you have for the Generator deck. It has a quick effect during either main phase where you contribute a Generator monster, including itself, to summon a level 9 Generator monster from your deck. Now this card is in a pretty interesting place. It came out back in Eternity Code, so theoretically, if it were going to get a Mega Tian reprint, it should have been from a year or 2 ago. However, it never actually did get that reprint, presumably because generators have never exactly been too relevant, and then even beyond that, Lober was never really useful in anything at all. Some people thought early on that this lack of a reprint would cause Lober to become expensive, but that never really happened, and we've seen this card sit at around $4 for at least the last year or so. However, it seems that just recently we've seen a spike in the price of Lober to where it now sits at $15 each, and I think the thing I'm not exactly sure of is like, why now? I don't believe we've seen any generator support come out, unless you're going to count the release of Sleipnir, the Runic Fusion monster that happens to be a level 9. Aside from that, I don't really see anything that would want to play a mini engine with Lober. I guess you could see it in some sort of plant deck with Mardell to bring out plant monsters, but that doesn't really seem that strong either. If you guys know of any concrete reason for Lober's sudden increase in price, please make sure that you let us all know down in the comment section. So this one is a fun little tech card to keep your eye on. It is Hattrunade. So in the current format, we actually have several decks looking to run multiple back row cards as forms of interruption. we have Unchained, which will typically have a copy of Escape and maybe an Infinite Impermanence in the back row, but we also have Labyrinth and Rescue Ace in the game, both of which are known for setting multiple cards. In the game right now, even with all of these back row dependent strategies, Lightning Storm just isn't that great of a card. It has a restriction where you can't have any face-up cards on your side of the field in order to activate it. Hattrunade effectively does the same thing, returning all set cards on the field back to the owner's hands, so your opponent has to either chain them then or allow them to be returned. Theoretically, this is a pretty solid card. Even though a lot of your opponent's cards are going to be chainable, what this does is force your opponent to chain their cards in interruptions before you commit anything to the field, making it a bit easier to navigate. For instance, against Rescue Ace, maybe you can force your opponent to use their copy of Emergency and tribute off a monster that hasn't yet used its effect, rather than allowing them to disrupt you with something like a Preventer and then tributing it off with Emergency, so your opponent isn't maximizing the value out of all of their cards. That said, I think Hattrunade is an interesting side deck option. Maybe not the best card to run, but it is pretty interesting. Looking at the card itself, Hattrunade actually has a few different printings, so in terms of just wanting a copy or two to try siding with, it should be pretty accessible. However, it might be worth looking at the prices of the original secret rares from back in Extreme Force. They're only around $2 each right now, but as we've seen so many times before, cheap original print secret rares that are still the highest rarity printing of the card do have a tendency to spike in price when the card becomes relevant, and I could certainly see this card going up to $8 to $10 for the original secret rares down the road. This is a card for you all to consider, especially if you see them lying around in someone's binder at your locals, and you can grab them for $1 or $2 in trades. Finally, there is one last card I want to talk about, and it's Decode Talker Heat Soul. So this card is a Link 3 monster that requires 2 Cyberse monsters with different attributes to make. I think that this one was used in a couple of Cyberse decks as part of their end boards at one point, but it really hasn't seen that much usage. Basically, this card lets you pay 1,000 life points to draw a card as a quick effect, so if you do it during your turn and then again during your opponent's draw phase, you're paying 2,000 life points to draw 2 cards, which is hopefully 2 hand traps that you can use to disrupt your opponent, or just 2 other cards that you can use to follow up on the next turn. The reason I want to look at this card specifically is actually all of the fire decks that we've seen running around recently, specifically Rescue Ace and Salamangreat, but also with Fire Kings coming up later this year, and then all of the other Snake Eye and Sinful Spoil cards that we'll be getting early in 2024. Now, one card that a lot of these decks make is Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf, a fire Cyberse monster which lets you add a resource from your graveyard back to your hand, but then you can't really do too much else with it. The other card that goes into this is Link Karibo, a really valuable card right now because it lets you make an SP that can banish an opponent's card since it's an extra deck monster, and it can also be revived out of the graveyard by tributing a level 1 monster as well. Because of this, I think all of those fire decks could consolidate a couple of these resources into a copy of Heat Soul to try and draw a couple of additional cards. With that being said, Heat Soul was just printed in Rarity Collection, but it feels like the luxury rare printings of this card are among the cheapest in the whole set. And while I don't think that this card should be at the top of the set by any means, I think the quarter century at least should be a bit more. For now, the quarter century printing is only about $5, and then with the other luxury rares such as the collector's rare and the ultimate rare, they're literally under $1 each. I get that there's a lot of good cards in Rarity Collection, but we should also be paying attention to some of these cards that are undervalued luxury rares because they will definitely have the potential to go up in price as time goes on. Definitely consider keeping an eye on Heat Soul moving forward, as it could be an interesting extra deck option going into the next couple of formats. Alright guys, that is all I have for today's episode. I think there are definitely some interesting opportunities to pick up certain cards in the game right now. A lot of things are maybe undervalued because they're just not the most popular options at the moment, but moving forward into the next couple of formats, I think those cards could be solid options. So make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button. In December, in that kind of like off-season period, we're going to go over some things that I think you guys should look at picking up moving into 2024. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you hit that thumbs up button. Let me know also in the comment section down below what cards you guys see trending on the market so I can cover them in future episodes. And of course, hit that subscribe button as well, and check out MSTmerch.com because we have our Black Friday sale going on right now, and it's gonna wrap up by the end of the day today. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.